from hand to hand. And they believe in this book as the main text of Jesus' message to us, right? And this is a sayings gospel, which, by the way, and one of the reasons I like picking the ones that we have for Epicurus and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, that we didn't even look at. I never even mentioned him. But if you look at their works, these are the same kind of thing. They're teachings of how you should live. Remember, the frame I was trying to give all of that was, post-Aristotelians are trying to think, how do we live the good life? Eudaimonia, the focus for Aristotle should be on living a good life here and now, not worrying about our life hereafter, right? And so how do you live the good life? And all of these different philosophies are different approaches to how you have a good life. Well, what we see in these kinds of texts are that same kind of thing. Here Jesus is telling us how to live a good life. And this is the one where you get the quote from Jesus when the apostles say, "When is heaven coming? Where is it?" Jesus responds, "Don't ask when is heaven coming or when it's coming, whatever. It's all around you. If only you had the eyes to see it. We're already here. We're already saved if you know how to think about it." I should mention Paul. Many people believe that Paul was a very significant individual in this. Remember St. Paul? Originally, Saul was not an actual apostle, never called by Jesus, never actually met Jesus. So he wasn't one of the original 12, right? In fact, initially, he was one of the prosecutors of the early Christians. He was attending them at his, didn't throw stones, but he held the cloaks for those who were throwing stones at St. Stephen, for example. But while on the road, he suddenly had a conversion experience. By the way, he wasn't riding a horse. He definitely didn't have a horse. All the paintings, if you've looked at the Renaissance and other paintings of Saul being knocked down by the light, he's knocked off of his horse. No horse. There is no horse. But in any case, he's has this conversion experience, and he becomes a Christian himself. And then he concludes he's the messenger, the apostle to those who were not Jewish. Right? So his message is primarily for like the Greeks, and if you follow his epistles, his letters, he's responding to places that he's already been to and converted many people. But he does get into trouble with the pillars of Jerusalem, so he does have to come back and argue with Peter and the other apostles, because some of the things he's been teaching are not things that they agree with. And a lot of it is concerned with what Gentiles, non-Jews, have to do in order to become a Christian. And apparently the conflict was the apostles, the original apostles, thought, well, this is primarily for a Jewish person who's becoming saved by Jesus' message, right? But the thing is, they expect you to still be kosher and follow all the Jewish laws as well. And Paul is saying, no, Jesus has completely redone the law. You don't have to worry about being Jewish at all. You don't have to do that. And so, of course, there's this conflict, and it never really was resolved. But in any case, Paul went on his merry way and converted people and said, no, you don't have to do this. No, you don't have to do that. Just believe in Jesus, and you're all set. So Paul, there's actually, if you're interested, there's an interesting book called Paul the Inventor. What founder? Oh, okay, so that's actually the wrong one. So this, the author of this book is Chaim Maccabee. I don't think he's still alive. I should check that. But he was a professor of religion in Oxford. And he wrote Paul, the Mythmaker, Paul and the Invention of Christianity. Because in the epistles, Paul responds to questions that people ask him. That we don't have any parables or stories from Jesus to answer. But Paul responds to them. Remember, he is an educated Roman citizen from Tarsus. And so he's also a rabbi himself, and because he's a mix, right? And he teaches people. One of the big questions that they had was, when you were here, you told us that if we believed in Jesus, we would be saved. Well, Joe Snuffy died. What about him? He believed in Jesus, but now he's dead. And Paul's response was basically, there will be a second coming. And all of those who believed in him will resurrect. And that sounded horrible to people, because it's kind of like, the Walking Dead, they always look really awful, I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl commercial, the one guy gets bit by somebody, and later on in the commercial, you can see he's already looking dead himself, People scared of, people rising up out of their tombs? No, not interested. Oh, don't worry, says Paul. You'll have a pure body, a spiritual body. Okay, so that kind of thing. Paul invents a lot of the story that becomes part of the dogma. And it's not from Jesus, it's actually from Paul. So that's certainly an issue. Notice that there are Orphic cults. These are Greek cults. One of Orpheus. How many folks are familiar with Orpheus? Orfeo. Orpheus was a great musician. Fell in love with shoot, I forget her name. I hate that when that happens. Well, we can do this.
Eurydice?
Her. He fell in love with her. By the way, this is the first opera performed in the first theater where the first opera was performed, as far as I know. With period instruments, even. So if you wanted to go back in time to see what the very first opera was like, this is kind of like, and it's free on YouTube, so YouTube. Eurydice. Is that what you said? Eurydice?
You know Eurydice.
And so, of course, this. And there's Orfeo, or Orpheus, Orpheus. So he falls in love with her. They get married. and a snake bites her on the heel and she dies. And so he's horrified, and so he goes to hell and convinces Hades, the god of death, to let her come back. And they agree. Okay, he's such a great musician, he persuades them. And so they let her come back on one condition, that he not turn around and look at her until she's completely out of the cave where they come out from the underworld. Right? So of course, as they're coming out of the cave, and she's behind him, he's not allowed to look at her, right? Well, he hears her trip and stumble, and what does he do? Turns around. And so he looks at her, and so she's withdrawn back into the cave. She's not resurrected. But so Orpheus comes out and in great sorrow sings all over the world. And by the way, so we have Orphic choirs, Orphic musical groups, and all, it's still there in a way. So we have Orphic cults, and what's the cult all about? That he is, he's gone to hell and tried to resurrect someone. So by the way, what does Jesus do? Dies on the cross. Well, well, the main thing is, though, that he actually dies for us on the cross. And I don't know if you've seen the movie The Passion. Should I do this to you, folks? Yes. Mel Gibson, yes. And I want the death, of course.
Sued for making this?
No.
They tried banning him for
He didn't get sued, but he got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, he got a ton of trouble for this news. Yeah, for exactly that depiction right there.
Yeah, did I give you a trigger warning ahead of time enough? I'm sorry. This is, by the way, Pope John Paul II, he loves you, said that this is the way it was when he saw it. But a fascinating aspect of this movie is the constant interplay between Lucifer or Satan and Jesus. Satan is constantly on the periphery of this whole experience and constantly trying to make things worse to keep Jesus from accomplishing the mission. But he says it is accomplished. And at that point, Satan is defeated.
Why did he get in trouble for that? Just because he was graphic?
Oh yeah, not a lot of people like the depiction of Jesus in this movie. They thought it was way too graphic.
That and the movie had it was debatably, weirdly anti-Semitic. Because,
It didn't help that depth, no.
usual Jesus sort of vibe.
The Chaim Maccabee, the author of Paul, The Invention of Christianity, wrote another book called Revolution in Judea, and argues that the various parts of the story that depict the Jews as being at fault let his death be on us and on our children, say the crowd, to Pilate, right? Is all a fiction added by European writers.
There's like another movie I watched where it wasn't even like the book of Romans that they sort of judgment or the crucifixion was like a Jewish court or something like that. I forgot what
Well, there were two, apparently there were two courts, the Pilate